Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Shuffle Music Reviews and Retrospectives from a Gracelessly Aging Millennial. My name's Keaton. We are here to count down the top five albums of the year 1992. 1992, another fantastic year for music. Of course, we're coming off of the epic year that was 1991. 1992, almost as strong. It's just as deep as 91. What makes it a little less explosive than 91 is that in 91, you had so many artists come out with either smash debut albums or breakthrough albums. So you have artists like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Teenage Fan Club, Pearl Jam, really burst onto the scene, which gave 1991 an explosiveness that 1992 doesn't so much have. 1992 is great, but in a very different way. In 92, you have a lot of already well established artists come out with great additions to their discographies. So, still a fantastic year in a different way from 1991. A lot of these artists that we're talking about here are artists that we've talked about in previous installments on this top five. And so, let's get into things. Right now, we got top five albums, plus we have a full runner-up list of five honorable mentions. Plus, we got a couple of live albums that I want to talk briefly about at the end. Can't count live albums in the rankings or even in the runners-up, but I can make mention of some of the live albums that I really, really dig from time to time, and there are two great ones from 1992. So, without further ado, let's get started. Number five of 1992 is Wish by The Cure. And this is, of course, The Cure's follow-up to their masterpiece, which was 1989's Disintegration, which, of course, topped my list for that year. And this is kind of the perfect follow-up to that record. About a third of this album sounds like Disintegration tracks with a sort of updated sound for the 1990s. Notice I said updated, not upgraded. There are tracks like Open, which is the opening track, which is awesome. Apart, From the Edge of the Deep Green Sea. These are all examples of what I'm talking about. Like Disintegration, you have essentially the same formula here. These really catchy, hooky drum and bass grooves underneath a wall of sound on the high end. Now, the difference here is that it's the 90s, so you get more guitar and less synth in that wall of sound, which is admittedly not as magical as what they did on Disintegration, but the 90s makeover fits the times, and those tunes are all great. Then they go more mainstream on a lot of tracks here, but in a really charming way. So you got Friday, I'm in Love, High, those are both really cool, more pop radio friendly tunes. Then you got Trust, which is a great acoustic guitar, piano, and synth ballad. So you actually do get some synth work on this album as well. It's a really enjoyable listen. Not as rewarding as Disintegration, but more accessible. And so on its own terms, you could argue it's just as successful. It's a really great follow-up to a masterpiece album. The Cure really experimented with a lot of different approaches over their career, particularly in the 80s. There were not two consecutive albums that really sounded the same or sounded all that similar. They experimented a lot. Not all those experiments were successful, in my view. Their discography, in my opinion, is kind of a mixed bag, which will make it really interesting to rank their albums, which we will definitely do at some point over the course of this show. But this tweaking of the dials between Disintegration and Wish really works very, very well. It's among their more successful adjustments album to album. And I think this album is a great listen just about all the way through. No skips here on Wish by The Cure. So that is a great number five pick. Number four is Us by Peter Gabriel. This is one of the most interesting albums in all of pop music history, I think. This is an absolutely fascinating record. So after his masterpiece, Peter Gabriel brings back Daniel Lanois to produce this one again. But 6 years have passed since that album. And in that time, Peter Gabriel divorced his childhood sweetheart wife after 15 years of marriage. He became estranged from his daughter He entered therapy. He had brief romances with Rosanna Arquette and also with Sinead O'Connor, who sings guest vocals on this album. And the result here reflects all of those experiences. The songs are wordy, they're dense, they're long, and they're kind of tortured, but in the most beautiful way possible. So a perfect example of this is Come Talk to Me, the album opener. It's a direct plea for communication with his daughter. Digging in the Dirt is about his time in psychotherapy. You have a song like Secret World, which is the closer, which deals with the sort of mysteries about ourselves that we keep to ourselves no matter how much we share with other people. This is all pretty heady, pretty deep stuff. The songs here are not commercial. They're not accessible. They're not necessarily very hook driven. They really demand more attention than that. And so it's kind of a high maintenance album, but I think it's extremely rewarding. Musically speaking, the production is top notch. Daniel Lanois, fantastic. As always, you get these multi instrumental sort of world beat sounds with, of course, these great booming drum tracks underneath. Gabriel's vocals sound great. Like I said, the songs are a lot less straightforward, a lot less catchy, a lot less commercial. So this album is really kind of a fascinating example of an artist trying to recreate the success of a commercial breakout massive hit like so, but having too much artistic integrity not to let his personal baggage of the past several years make itself felt in the final product. So you have a lot of these songs that don't really lend themselves to radio play because there's just they're too complicated for really commercial absorption. Now, the exception to that is a track called Steam on this album, which is such an obvious and blatant attempt to recreate Sledgehammer from '86's So, which was this massive hit that spent almost a year straight on the charts. In fact, it may have even been more than a year. I forget the exact details, but that was on the charts forever. I mean, it was just a massive song. And it's as if on this record he realized, oh, wait a minute, I need something for the radio to play for this album. So let me just try and do kind of a knockoff Sledgehammer, which is what Steam is. And so musically speaking, it's the least interesting track on the record. But in context, it's kind of fascinating on its terms. You can't help but be intrigued by it because the whole album is this really interesting peek behind the curtain into Peter Gabriel's psyche as he creates one of the most complex and polarizing pop albums of the 90s. Not everybody loves this one. There are a lot of people who don't like this one at all. This does not always rank near the top of these 92 lists that people put out. In fact, some publications gave this album a pretty lukewarm review because it's complicated. It's high maintenance. These are not the kind of songs that you're going to hear or play on the supermarket that you could sing along to. There's no In Your Eyes here. There's no Sledgehammer here. But I think it's a really beautiful album and a really fascinating one. I could talk forever about this when I have more time to. Perhaps we'll do a deeper dive on this at some point in the future. But this is a top 5 list. So in the interest of time, we're going to keep things moving and we're going to go right on to our number 3 pick of 1992, which is the grunge epic Dirt by Alice in Chains. Now, Nirvana's Nevermind is no doubt the most iconic grunge album ever made. There's really no question about that. But if you separate out the sort of cultural impact from the music and you really just look at the music itself with a critical eye, and you really want to distill the grunge genre down to its purest form, I think you can make a strong case that Dirt is the best and most quintessential grunge album of the early 90s, which would essentially make it, of course, the best grunge album ever. It's pure grunge. Some people will tell you this is part grunge, part sludge, part metal, part hard rock. I would argue grunge music itself is a mixture of those different styles. So I think it's kind of redundant to talk about this as a combination of those different musical genres. I think grunge really is that when you get down to it. So yeah, I think this is about as essential a grunge album as you'll ever hear. It's relentlessly dark. The songs here are about addiction, loneliness, despair, and death. This is not a cheery listen, but the songs here are just killer. I mean, the first half of this album especially is just an amazing run of tracks. Them Bones, Damn That River, Rain When I Die. Just an epic vocal on that by the late, great Lane Staley, of course. Down in a Hole, Sick Man, and Rooster. That is just a fantastic stretch of songs. Then you have the so-called Junkie trilogy in the middle there with Junkhead, Dirt, and Godsmack, all about drug addiction. And then, of course, you have the final track, Would, Would, question mark, is a tribute to Andrew Wood of Mother Love Bone, whose death inspired the Temple of the Dog album by Chris Cornell and Pearl Jam the year before. Jerry Cantrell's guitar work and Lane Staley's vocals here create such a unique and unmistakable energy and vibe. This is a brutal album. It's not an easy listen, but it is no doubt an indispensable staple of the grunge genre for good reason. It is simply fantastic. Alice in Chains' Dirt is number 3. All right. The top 2 albums here are kind of turning the page from the grunge genre a bit, a lot, I should say. In fact, quite a lot. For number 2, we're going to go with Automatic for the People by R.E.M. This, to me, is the quintessential R.E.M. album. Gone is the sort of college rock jangle of the 80s and the self-aware tongue-in-cheek pretense that made up a decent chunk of 1991's Out of Time, which I had as an honorable mention. That's got some great songs on it. That's a very strong record as well. But for Automatic for the People, they bring in John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin fame, of course, to write these beautiful string arrangements on songs like Drive, The Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight, Everybody Hurts, and Night Swimming. All of those are outstanding tracks. Then, of course, you've got Man on the Moon, the great Andy Kaufman tribute, which became the title for the Jim Carrey biopic, which, of course, featured that song prominently in the soundtrack. To me, though, the underrated gem on this album is Try Not to Breathe, which is track 2. Just a beautiful song about an old man preparing to die. It's plaintive, it's melancholy, really puts you in the shoes of the character singing the song. A truly outstanding vocal performance by Michael Stipe on that. That smoky, raspy voice is really Stipe at his best, in my opinion. And the whole feel of this album, it's refined, it's polished, it's clean, but it's also dark and introspective without being gloomy or depressing. It's just a really, really special mood that they captured on this whole record from start to finish. This was their 5th consecutive collaboration with producer Scott Litt, who first teamed up with them on 1987's Document, which was my number 1 of that year. And this was no doubt their best album since then, and perhaps their strongest in their entire catalog. They've had some other really great ones, so I'm not going to finalize that. We'll do an album ranking for R.E.M. at some point, no doubt. But Automatic for the People, a very, very special album. And the second best of 1992. The number 1 album of 1992 is the furthest from a grunge album that you'll find, and that is Harvest Moon by Neil Young. Now, Harvest Moon is always considered the sort of sister album to 1972's Harvest by Neil Young, which contains the massive hit Heart of Gold, of course, and understandably so. They share half a title. Neil Young for this brings back the same backing band as he had on Harvest, the Stray Gators. They're both acoustic folk country rock albums, but I always thought Harvest Moon was even more akin to Neil Young's 1978 album Comes a Time, which I think is one of the best and most underrated albums of the 1970s. Like Comes a Time, Harvest Moon is wistful, it's plaintive, it's lilting, and it's just absolutely beautiful. It's got this really gentle warmth to it that just washes over you when you listen to it. It's an amazing piece of music, I think, from start to finish. Unknown Legend, which is the opener, the sort of bittersweet love song about a small town waitress who rides a Harley. Just an amazing opening track. From Hank to Hendrix, a reflective song that sort of plots a long-term relationship against the timeline of Neil's musical influences, from Hank Williams to Jimi Hendrix, of course. The title track here, Harvest Moon, is a classic song about rekindling an old flame. The guitar harmonics pepper the song like twinkling stars against the black Summer Sky. It's just so evocative, so perfect. You also have Dreamin' Man, which is another gorgeous song on here. Then you have a live recording at the end of a song called Natural Beauty, a sort of 10-minute acoustic epic, making for a perfect album closer. This album is not quite flawless. There's a couple tracks here that I think are a little overproduced, namely Such a Woman, which is a really beautiful song. It's this really beautiful, slow piano ballad. The production on that is a little much. There's a great live recording of songs that are just about exclusively from this album called Dreamin' Man 92. In fact, I think every song on that recording is an example of Neil sort of road testing the material that will become this album. Those are very stripped down acoustic recordings of all these songs. Such a Woman is an example where all you need is the vocal and the piano. You don't need the bells and whistles that the official studio version brings to the table. That was the case on Harvest as well. I think some of Harvest is a little overproduced, while most of it is sort of cool and mellow and stripped down. But overall, I mean, the songs here are just front to back amazing. It captures such a mood, such a vibe. I just love it. And this is another curveball from Neil Young, who spent the entire 1980s throwing deliberate curveballs to his record label. And finally, in 1990, he hit the decade running with the grunge rocker Ragged Glory, which ranked on my 90 list. And this is another startling pivot, but one that pays off big time. He would, of course, go back to grunge and rock for 94 and 95 with Sleeps with Angels and then the Pearl Jam collaboration Mirrorball. But this is a beautiful acoustic respite that makes for great repeat listening. I've gotten so much repeat listening out of this album. This is the kind of album you could throw on while you cook dinner and not offend the family. I can't play Dirt by Alice in Chains while I'm cooking. This is perfect background music for a barbecue or anything like that. It's just awesome. Harvest Moon by Neil Young, the number one album of 1992. All right, so now we're going to get into some runners up here. A lot of great runners up in 1992. One of them being an album that I've talked about a decent amount on this show so far. It's by one of my favorite bands called Stone Temple Pilots. The album is called Core. This is their debut. Just a terrific album. Great playing here by the DeLeo brothers on bass and guitar, giving these songs, I think, a really unique feel. This is one of the most unfairly maligned albums of the 90s. They were criticized for jumping on the grunge bandwagon, a criticism I simply don't understand. Isn't the whole point of music to be influenced by other great artists? And what if you were a band coming up in the early 90s and you realized that a certain genre was in fashion, what, you wouldn't try and make a great version of that genre to get your foot in the door so you can live the dream of making music for a living? To me, to like hold that against them is just kind of insane. And they would prove very quickly on their next album, Purple, that they're much more than just a grunge band. But this is definitely a grunge genre record. Scott Weiland's vocals are just so one of a kind, so unique, one of the best singers of his day. And I think the album is just terrific. I think Dead and Bloated is a great opener. Wicked Garden, Sin, Plush is such a great song. Just great chord structures on that song, harmonies, melodies. I mean, those are basically jazz chords on that song. So to me, this is much more than just a run-of-the-mill grunge record. But even as such, I think it works really well. And this is a great example, by the way, because, you know, there's some people who probably feel like, oh, what, you know, you're missing certain artists every year. Every year, don't you like this band? Don't you like that band? Just because they don't rank doesn't mean I don't like them. Stone Temple Pilots, I've said, one of my favorite bands. One of the first bands I ever got to know as a sort of adolescent exploring music for the first time in a serious way. And despite them holding a very, very high place in my musical sensibilities, I don't know that they'll ever rank in the top five. I don't know, because past this album, looking into the future years, it's kind of unlikely that they'll ever rank in the top five. And so this just goes to show you, just because a band doesn't rank in the top five doesn't mean I don't like them. Top five is a hard list to crack. Certainly. A lot of albums come out every year that I've listened to. And in a lot of cases, it's just a matter of timing. Like Stone Temple Pilots, their first two CDs came out in 92 and 94, which are both really, really strong years. If they had come out a year later, 93, 95, which are weaker years in my opinion, they'd probably both rank. So sometimes it's just a matter of what the competition happens to be any given year. Just because an album doesn't rank or a band doesn't rank doesn't mean I don't like them. In this case, I love this album. It's just 92 was a stacked year, and so it is a runner-up. Another great album from 1992 is Joshua Judge's Ruth by Lyle Lovett. I had his second album, his sophomore effort, Pontiac, on that would have been my 87 list, I believe. And Joshua Judge's Ruth is a great tour of American music. Lyle Lovett, of course, a great country singer and songwriter, but he also dabbled in a lot of gospel and soul and blues. And on this, you get all of those styles in one album. You get more traditional country tunes like North Dakota and Family Reserve, which are both just great songs. Then you have some soul-infused songs like I've Been to Memphis, Baltimore, She Makes Me Feel So Good. And then you even got like a smoky jazz number like All My Love Is Gone. Really terrific album. Like I said, this is a stacked year. I had a feeling this may rank when I did the 87 list, looking ahead to this. Ultimately, it is a runner-up, but a great record, no doubt. I encourage you to check it out. And of course, we got this one, Rage Against the Machine, the self-titled debut, bringing revolutionary politics to suburban kids. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, right? Bringing that rebellion against your parents and putting it in a political context. Great album, great debut. A lot of people have this ranked a little higher in 92. I am of the unpopular but correct opinion that the best Rage Against the Machine album is actually their last one, which is The Battle of Los Angeles. That's got Calm Like a Bomb, New Millennium Homes, Testify, Guerrilla Radio. Love that one. Love that one. That also has a really kind of raw kind of production. That album sounds like what Metallica was trying to do with Saint Anger, but did not pull off. But anyway, I digress. Rage Against the Machine, great debut, big bands, obviously, big album at the time. Can't take that away from them. Worth a runner-up mention for sure. Now, if you want to look at even more revolutionary music, go to South Africa for Vusi Malasella's When You Come Back. A lot of you may not have heard of this album. When we talked about South Africa on the Do Dissident show, I put a performance of Vusi's in our intermission for one of the episodes. Vusi Malasella's When You Come Back, published, of course, just approaching the end of the apartheid era in South Africa. The title track is a tribute to the South Africans living in exile who would soon get to return. Just really rousing, joyful, triumphant, unpretentious African folk and jazz music on here. When You Come Back and Red Song are the two key tracks on here, but the whole album is just beautiful from start to finish. For those of you who are not familiar with Vusi Malasela, definitely check him out. This is not even his best album, in my view, from a musical standpoint, but it is great nonetheless. If his voice sounds familiar, you may recognize his voice as the backing vocal on the Dave Matthews Band track Every Day. That was really his introduction to like mainstream American audiences. But he has a body of work here that is just incredible. He is a treasure, both as a citizen of the world and a musician. So When You Come Back by Vusi Malasela, a lot of his tracks are sort of repackaged and re-released on different CDs because obviously as a South African artist, there's African releases and African release dates, and then they have different release dates in the States. Some sites have this listed as a 1994 release, but it first came out in South Africa in the year 1992, and so I'm counting it for this year. It's an amazing recording. I definitely urge you to check this one out. That's When You Come Back by South African great Vusi Malasela. Then we have this one here, the Screaming Trees with their album Sweet Oblivion. This band here is often lumped in with the sort of big four of the Seattle sound: Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains. But this is really its own thing. They are their own thing. This is their sixth studio album. It's no doubt their breakthrough. Really unique vocals here by Mark Lanigan. Kind of this deep, gravelly baritone that in no way attempts to conform to the current sound. This is really as much a classic rock album as a 90s grunge album. It's an oddity in the best sense of the word. I really dig this one. I encourage you to check this one out, of course. There's a lot of albums here in 92 that I'm not putting up on the screen that are quite good, just like in 91. I just rattled off some mentions. I think the Megadeth follow-up to Rust in Peace, Countdown to Extinction is quite good. I think Sublime's debut, 40 Ounces to Freedom, is really great for what it is. Dirty by Sonic Youth. Sonic Youth, another example of a band that I do not dislike. It just, for some reason, never breaks through onto the actual rankings. Angel Dust by Faith No More, great album. Southern Harmony and Musical Companion by the Black Crowes, their sophomore follow-up to Shake Your Moneymaker, came out this year too. Another really solid effort. So just because they're not on here doesn't mean I don't like them. 1992 was a stacked year in a different way than 1991, but stacked nonetheless. And as I mentioned at the top, there's two live albums that I want to give a special shout out to. So because I can't rank live albums, it's just not fair, because when you're playing a live concert, you're pulling from your entire catalog of songs. So you could play a live album full of all-time greatest hits, and it's not fair to rank that alongside new work by artists who are introducing a catalog of all new material in any given year. And so I can't rank live albums, and I won't even give runner-up status to live albums because I don't want to force anything else out. But I will give honorable mention to some live albums when they come up in rare circumstances. But, of course, you have Eric Clapton's Unplugged. This is the best-selling live album of all time. Sold 26 million copies. Obviously, you have the great alternate version of Layla, which is arguably more popular than the original studio version by Derek and the Dominoes. Great recording there. You also have Tears in Heaven, the beautiful rendition of the song that Eric Clapton wrote for his late son. Great playing on this one. A great recording, just crystal clear, beautiful live recording. So Eric Clapton's Unplugged, a great live album from 1992. Clapton was also involved in another great live album from this year. This one is less well known, but equally good. I think this is equally worth checking out. George Harrison live in Japan. Eric Clapton plays with his band on this one. You really get a combination here of George Harrison solo material and some great Beatles classics like While My Guitar Gently Weeps and Something. And like I said, the Harrison tunes on here are really terrific as well. Get all the hits, What Is Life, My Sweet Lord, Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth is one of my favorite songs ever. Great version of that on this album. So George Harrison live in Japan, great double disc recording here. Cannot recommend this one enough. This is one you may not have come across in your musical journey. So definitely check out Live in Japan by George Harrison. So a couple great live albums in 1992. All right, folks, that is our show. We're just going to recap real quick for everybody here. Our top 5 albums. At number 5, we got Wish by The Cure. Number 4, we got Us by Peter Gabriel. At number 3, the grunge classic Dirt by Alice in Chains. Then you got R.E.M's Automatic for the People at number 2. And Harvest Moon by Neil Young. Third ranking for Neil Young in this list series so far. First atop the list. So 1992's number 1 album, Harvest Moon by Neil Young. Let me know what you think I got right. Let me know what you think I got wrong. Leave your list in the comments section. Please smash that like button whether you like this video or not. It helps me out in the algorithm. Please smash that subscribe button on the way out. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time.